Hello and welcome to Planoly Business School. My name is Cody Foster and I will be your host for the day. This is the Design 501 session and we have an incredible lineup of speakers today. I am so excited to learn from these panelists. Just a little bit of, before we get started, I want to let you know how the Q&A is going to work. So there will be a Q&A at the end. We will save as much time for it as possible and we will get to as many questions as possible. If you have a question, I highly recommend submitting it in the question box as soon as possible. The Planoly team will be behind the scenes the whole time, kind of organizing those questions and getting them ready for the panelists. So if you wait until the end to submit your question, there's just like a little bit less likely of a chance that it will get answered. So if you have questions now or throughout the presentation, I do strongly recommend that you submit them as soon as you can. Otherwise, each of our panelists has prepared a short presentation for you on everything from video editing to designing beautiful carousels to building beautiful Instagram grids. So they are going to go through all of that with you, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro to Planoly. So Planoly was started in 2016, so almost a decade ago, as the first visual Instagram grid planner. Obviously, social media has evolved a lot since then, and so has Planoly. So it is now a powerful multi-platform scheduling tool. So you can schedule everything from TikToks to Instagram posts to threads to LinkedIn posts, basically anything and everything you can think of. You can probably plan and schedule that on Planoly. Planoly also introduced the Creator Store last year, which is the all-in-one link in bio tool. So this is like your link in bio storefront. So not only can you link to your websites, to your services, to your affiliate links, your storefronts, all of those things, but you can also sell digital products like digital worksheets or ebooks, e-courses, anything like that, some things that are downloadable. And you can do that all through Creator Store with 0 transaction fees. Tomorrow we will be sending out an email with the recording in case you want to watch it again or in case you missed it the first time, as well as a 30% off code to try Planoly. And you do get a free 2-week trial. So definitely encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, the team would be happy to walk you through anything that you need to know. And without further ado, I will introduce you to your course instructors. Today we have Sydney Price, Debbie Poe, and Lauren Selwood. Like I said, they are all amazing. We've worked with them before, and they are just so incredibly talented, and I'm so excited to learn from them today. So I am going to pass things over to Sydney, and she is going to kick us off with a little bit of a course on video editing.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Hello, friends. My name is Sydney Price. I'm a social media strategist and content creator based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I help creators, entrepreneurs, creative humans in general to create content that connects and engages their audiences in a way that is story-led and fun, right? So I think that when it comes down to content creation and editing, like your story is what helps drive everything forward. So in this little presentation, I have about 10 minutes, but we're going to get through it. I'm going to walk through kind of like my editing strategy and how I take my content from the camera roll to the feed. Your edit is basically your content strategy in motion, right? So like every time you think about sitting down to edit, you're editing for the person on the other side of the screen. So in the session, we're going to break down how to actually get that edit to where you want it to be before you even press record, before you even open up an app. Like we want to make sure everything is set and ready beforehand. So to start, you want to plan your pre-edit. After that, we're going to talk about editing to engage your audience. And then I'm going to let you steal my editing workflow. Like seriously, I'm going to give you all the tips, all the gems. We'll have like a Q&A afterwards too, where I'll share some more, but like we really want to get into the nitty gritty of it. So this is how we're going to do that. So planning your pre-edit. I think for a lot of creators, right, we are editing in between moments. Like we're trying to edit before we go to work. We might be editing before bed, during a lunch break. Like we're trying to get other things done. So it really comes down to how we're prepping ourselves before we even get to the editing process. I think a lot of people feel like they don't have the time or the skill or the structure to edit a good video. But if you have a good structure, you don't always need a ton of time or a ton of skill and experience. So this is how we're going to do that. So before we even get to editing, before you even press record, we're going to think about these 3 things, right? Number 1, do I have everything I need to execute this idea today? Like, do we have the footage? Well, if you're not filming, do we have the footage? Do we have the editing programs? Do we have the time? Do we have the overlays? Like, ask yourself, am I really prepped and ready to get this done? If not, we might need a pivot. Number two, do I have any existing content that can be used for this idea? A lot of creators and a lot of the most successful creators are the ones that know how to repurpose their content. You have to be able to look at what you already have and how you can like flip it and make it different, right? So, a lot of times you probably do have really good usable content. You just have to get creative. And lastly, do I believe this idea is relevant, interesting, or helpful for my audience? I think a lot of creators miss the mark when they're thinking more for themselves and less about their audience. Because at the end of the day, your audience is the one who's going to be taking in the content, right? So I think it's really important to think about how is this person going to receive what I have to share. After that, I like to think about whether or not this idea is a high lift or a low lift content idea. Your high lift content ideas are going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy. This is like our bread and butter where a lot of our passion goes into, right? But then our low lift content is something that we can churn out a bit quicker, right? And I think low lift content is super, super helpful when you are short on time. So ask yourself, how much time do I actually have right now? Can I give 4 hours to an edit, or do I just have 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes. So I think it's really important to think about your capacity for editing before you even get to the edit. I have a few examples of what high lift and low lift content looks like. This really depends on your skill set and your personal like content style too. So this may also change depending on like the types of content you create. But for me, I find that the breakdown videos that I do and how to videos where I have a lot of examples and overlays, those tend to take a lot more time. But my lower lip videos are usually the ones where I'm just sitting down and I'm yapping to the camera. So that's easier for me to chop up and edit. As a pro tip, when it comes to your edit, you want to think about, is this person going to be able to take the story away from my edit, whether or not they're watching the video or listening to the video? And it's crazy to think, but 9 times out of 10, people are either doing one of each. Like, they're not typically doing both. So are my visuals really telling my story in an effective way? Or is the audio story, whether I'm talking or the audio design, is that keeping people's attention and engaging them as well? All right, so here's a peek into my editing workflow. I think as creators, a lot of times, like our creative process, it can get a little crazy. So for me, I have to break it down, and this is the exact formula that I use for every single video that I edit. And I think this is what really helps me to stay on track. Even if I do need to put the edit down for a second and come back to it, I know where I am in the process. So I think this is really helpful for the creators that are really trying to figure out what their content creation process is, because we can't just go from the camera roll to posting without something happening in between. Awesome. So step one, you really want to organize your content before you even begin. If your content is all over the place, like that's not going to help. It's actually going to burn time and make you feel very, very overwhelmed. So, something that I love to do is make sure that I have my content in different folders, either on my phone or on my laptop, like wherever I'm going to do that edit. This helps so much when it comes to finding B roll, finding overlays, examples. Like, it helps when you're not just sifting through everything. Sorry about the noise. It's Elena. But it helps when you're not like sifting through everything, so you can actually go to the place where the content is being stored. One hack for the content creators that edit on their laptops, I like to move everything over to my laptop and rename every single piece of footage based on the scene or the topic. So that really helps me to know, okay, well, these clips are for the beginning of my video versus the middle versus the end of my video. So this really helps to speed up my editing process, and also helps when I'm done with the edit. If I ever want to come back to it, I know what it's for. Step two, your story. Your story is really your starting place, right? Like, this is where context meets content. right? I think every single piece of content is helping to tell a larger story. And when we know what our story is, it helps to drive our video content forward. So I think the best way to tell an intentional story, especially if you're creating short form video, is to think about telling shorter stories. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And I think when you can set up your video content like that, whether it's 30 seconds or a minute and 30 seconds, like that's how you can actually keep people's attention and have something that they can follow through. I think something that really, really helped me when I was a social media manager working for a WNBA team, you're doing a lot of content every single game. I think we pumped out like 45 pieces of content every single game. And I had to think about how could I tell this story in a way that engages someone quickly and moves them on to the next thing, right? So I think for you, you want to definitely think about like how am I moving people along the process, whether it be through my sounds or my overlays or the text on screen or my hook, and really mapping that out before you even get to your edit. So I think that when it comes to editing, a lot of it is taste and a lot of it is practice. So you really have to let yourself practice and explore different editing styles. I think it's great to watch the content creators that you really enjoy and like take little tidbits from them here and there, but it's also really, really important to develop your own signature style. So I think for me, something that helps me not get super overwhelmed is to choose 2 to 3 different fonts that I can stick to consistently, 2 to 3 sound effects that I can stick to consistently, and background music that I can use for a majority of my content. Now, these are the things that help you to develop your signature style because people will start to recognize you for those things. At this point, I'm kind of known for the yellow text on screen, and I love that for me. So when you're editing, like allow yourself to play and find different things that work for you and your brand. I think when it comes to editing, you're always editing to engage your audience either visually or through sound, right? A lot of my engagement comes from how I'm popping things up on the screen. And I think that really helps when I'm adding things that add to my story. So if your story is already mapped out, these other elements are just simply supporting that. So don't think of them as the things that are really leading the way, but more so supporting and adding context where you need it. A way that I kind of like get some early engagement earlier in my videos, usually those 3 to 5 seconds, those first 3 to 5 seconds, is to bring all of the great stuff to the front. So that way they know what they're getting into before they even watch the video. So add some examples, give them like a 1, 2, 3 on what they're about to watch. Those are the things that help stop the scroll and keep people's attention to watch throughout the entire video. So when it comes to audio design, I think that everyone isn't an audio designer and that's totally okay. But when it comes to your audio, you don't want to overwhelm. I think less is more. And especially when you're adding different sound effects and things to add to your story, it's kind of like what's happening visually, right? We're just adding pieces that help to support the overall story, but not tell the story for us. So I think something that helps me is to turn all of my like extra sound effects down. Don't lead with them. They shouldn't be competing with your like voiceover and your main content. They should be supporting them always. And I think this is pretty much rule of thumb, but I see a lot of creators really miss this. You're not editing for the platform, right? Like the platform has its own safe zones that are really important to pay attention to because when someone's watching something visually, it can take away from the context that they're getting from that video. So you don't want to have things all the way over here, all the way over there. Like you want to make sure that you're kind of staying within the safe zones so that people's natural eye can go towards the content that you want them to take in. So I think this is really important to just kind of like take note of for any creators that are just like really trying to figure out their style. It's great to have a nice looking video, but it's not great when it's overwhelming and kind of getting in the way of other things on the screen. Main takeaways, I know there was a lot of information and it's totally okay. Like I think a lot of the edits and like editing to creating to become a better editor and a better storyteller comes from practice. So make sure that you're editing in a way that can be repeatable in a structure that feels right for your brand. And then edit for your community in a way that actually connects with them and engages them and gets them the information that you want them to have. So thank you for watching my little piece of this section. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney. I think if there is one thing I've learned throughout this webinar series is that I'm not using my iPhone photo albums to their full potential. So I love that you have that in there. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Debbie. If you've not seen Debbie's animated carousels, please go look at her Instagram right now, pull them up because she's about to talk to you about the magic behind them.
Thank you, Cody, and thank you, Sydney. I learned so much from you, and I agreed with everything you said. I feel like it kind of overlaps with some things I'm going to talk about today. So thank you. Cody's going to be helping me with the slides. I'm Debbie, as you know, and I'm a full-time content creator and agency co-founder based out of Vancouver, Canada. I've been doing content for almost a decade now, which is kind of crazy. And I can't believe how much my content has changed within that period of time, as social media platforms have always changed. But the main thing that has remained the same is that you have to be creative and you have to be innovative and willing to try new things. And I'll be honest, I don't really have any formal training when it comes to graphic design or social media. I'm almost entirely self-taught. And that's why I always encourage all my clients, you don't have to go to school for this. This is something you can do with enough practice and dedication. And with that, I've actually done, I've managed to surpass 50,000 followers on Instagram recently. And that's something that anyone can do. And obtain many amazing brand partnerships, including the one here, which I so love working with family. And today, I'll be sharing about my favorite content type, which I believe is quite underrated, and that's carousels, and especially carousels that are animated, which I know I get a lot of questions about. So I'm going to be sharing some of my pro tips and insights today. And just a little FYI, I managed to grow my Instagram by about almost 20K 20,000 followers just last year from carousels. So that just shows you that's kind of crazy. So this is, we're going to go over the anatomy of an effective carousel. I believe that there's designs that will engage your target audience, and there's a certain formula to it, in my opinion. So we have a carousel outline here that I've created. And I believe I was going to ask everyone, but I'll just answer my own question. Which are the most important pages of a carousel? I believe that they're the first two. I know that most people would think it's the first one, but first two, because there are two chances for your carousel to be shown on the home feed of your community. So if you're scrolling on your home feed and you see a carousel and you don't look at it the first time, it will show up later with the second slide showing. And that's why I call your second page a second chance hook. And I'll get into that a little more very soon. But that pretty much means that you have two chances to engage your community, the people who are following you, that is. But if you are trying to reach more non-followers, you are obviously going to focus more on your first page because that's what shows up on your Explore. And I'm going to go over some tips over how to create a strong title page for your carousel. So this is part 1A. So visual and text hooks. I know a lot of people like to focus more on either text or visuals, but you can do both or whatever depends on your niche and your style. So as I mentioned before, there's only a limited time to engage your target audience. And that's why it's really essential that your text hooks and your visuals are very they really speak to your particular niche. And personally, I prefer having font. I know not everyone likes that, but I prefer it because I feel like it really catches the eye from the Explore page. So I gave this little example. This posted pretty well recently. And I've talked about how I can monetize my skills as a creator, and it tends to get a lot of attraction from this little hook here that I have visually. And I also add in a lot of scrapbook and aesthetic cutout images. And I like to use my own images as much as possible, but obviously I use the Elements library, which I'll get into very soon. And I also add in a little secondary text hook, that little pink note slip there, if you can see it. I just talk about being a full-time content creator and agency co-founder. That just gives more SEO keywords, I believe, and more context. But I make it smaller so it's not taking away from the main hook. And I believe that if you have, um, while you might not know what to do at first, the best way is to research your topic by looking onto the explore page. So usually your explore page speaks to your niche because it aligns with what you've been engaging with. So I just like to scroll on there, and if I see something that really catches my eye, I save it into an inspo folder for later reference. And then I really like to analyze what hooks and aesthetics speak to my brand, and then I adapt it to my own voice. This is very important. You're not going to just steal someone else's content. And if you at least even kind of copy the outline, you should at least credit them. So this is, I believe, really important and great courtesy, but you want to adapt it to your own voice by adding your own brand logos, your own colors and text. And once you do that, you'll eventually find your own rhythm. I don't want you to be discouraged at first if you don't love your first carousels. That's my first ones were really rough. So you really, it's just a process. And the more you do it, the better you'll get, obviously. And my mantra is always better posted than perfect. So just get it posted, and believe me, you'll get so much better as you go along. Just a quick little recap about the second page. So the second page, I like to actually add in a lot more text on this one that's juicy, that kind of, so if someone ignored my carousel the first time, they see this slide, they'll be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I even added in a little CTA at the very bottom, a little call to action, just saying, keep swiping for more like details. So I believe that this is something I wouldn't add on the first slide because it's too long, but the second slide, it could work. So this is part 2. This is the main carousel body. So I believe it really should contain value. It might not be written, it might be visual, but there should be value of some kind. I really believe that carousels shouldn't be, the best length, in my opinion, is from 5 to 10 slides, because I feel like under 5, it's a bit short if you are trying to add in some value. I mean, it's all right, but I believe that people are more likely to save or share if there's more content in there. And above 10 can be tough for keeping people's attention. So that's where I feel like that's a key area of keeping it within that length. And I really advise that you create a quick outline before you start. So that's basically, I just create mine on Notes app. I usually just label it out, slide 1, 2, 3, etc. And I just quickly write in what I'm going to put on each slide. This helps prevent a lot of overwhelm and stress, so that I just feel like I'm calm and collected when I'm creating, because just like Sydney said before, you can spend hours and hours on here, and you really want to be sure you're organized beforehand, and that prevents a lot of unnecessary stress. So on each slide, you're going to try to create a post that is as irresistibly savable and shareable as possible. And that comes not from just adding in generic copy or images that you can get from anywhere. You really want to add yourself in there. And how do you do that? That's by personal stories, insights, and images. Because if you remember, everyone has access to ChatGPT and to Google these days. So you really need to add in your own personal contribution to the conversation, whatever you're sharing about. And my favorite way is by adding in those pro tips and adding in personal experiences that can't be created on AI. So this is part 3 of creating a carousel that outline that is effective, and that is CTAs. So I feel that that's something that is very underused by many creators. So call to actions, I believe that they should be in the last slide of your caption, of your carousel, plus your caption. And this should be pretty much every single post, no matter what you are creating. Some might be a little less necessary, but when you're doing stronger posts such as educational ones, I believe you really need call to actions in there, because you need to provide your audience with clear next steps to first off gain more engagement from them, solidify them within your community, and even obtain potential customers. So what you want to focus on is getting them to save it for future reference, sharing that content with other audience members that might need it, and to follow for similar content. And I also recommend asking, putting in a trigger word. If you have automation set up, a trigger word that will send them a link or a freebie. And last but not least, try to ask a quick question, because you would be surprised how difficult it is for people to leave a comment if they don't have a prompt first. They just won't know what to say. And if you want to really gain that engagement, which I believe is really important for brand opportunities, really just add in those comments, that comment question. All right, and also one last thing about carousel outline is that if you find one that is really effective, be sure to just duplicate it. And I'll talk about that in the next part of this section. But basically, you can duplicate a design and use it again because you know it works well with your audience, and it saves you so much time, because I know this looks a bit daunting at first, but it gets easier. So yeah, this is a very, very quick crash course on it, but basically I want to share some of my favorite platforms and tools for creating carousels, especially ones that are animated. So I usually recommend these two platforms to start. I know there are many out there, but I prefer these, and I'll go over why. Either Canva or Adobe Express, and that is because both of them allow you to create many different types of content, but carousels especially, and you're able to create animated carousels. As far as I know, I don't know any other ones that allow you to do animated carousels. And that's why I would experiment with both of these. Both of them have their pros and cons. I'll go over some of them here, but you really just have to figure out what works best for your workflow. And the reason why I especially love them is that they have brand kits. So brand kits contain your own logos, your text, colors, images, and then you're able to just even automatically apply them to whatever post you're creating. So that's why I recommend them. So last year, as I mentioned before, animated carousels were the first posts to really go viral and gave me a lot of followers. Yeah, you can see here, I just gave a quick little video screen recording of how I make one. This is a very simple one, obviously. So I usually just open up my file in the right format and size, and note that Instagram recently changed their carousels to support 3:4 ratio. It used to be a little bit smaller, but now it's 1080 times 1440 pixels. This means that you probably are going to have to open it up as a custom size. As you can see on the left-hand side, there's a little screenshot of that. I recommend using that new size because it creates more real estate on your home feed, which means people have more time to engage with it. The bigger, the better, in my opinion. And after that, you're going to choose your chosen background and add your images. And either your images or your background can come from your own photo album, which I recommend, or you can choose it from their library of elements. And I'll go over that really soon. But during that time, you're probably going to be using a lot of AI tools on either Canva or Adobe Express. And my favorites are the background remover tools. That's like the one I have here, that image of myself. Obviously, I use the background remover tool. It just makes everything easier and immediately makes into a cute little sticker that I can animate. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about animations here. So you're going to select the items that you are animating and experiment with whatever works best. So both platforms offer great animations, but I have some favorites of both. So I first off recommend, when you're animating elements such as a text or a photo or anything else, don't use the transitional ones. You want to use the looping animations. Looping animations mean they have no start or end. They just are infinite, and they don't transition your item onto the page. So that means that they either go into the page or out of the page, because this usually results in your post just looking blank. It'll just basically have a blank spot where the text should have been, or a blank spot where the image should have been, and that's not a good look. And I've seen it happen a few times. Just avoid it. Use looping animations. So on Adobe Express, there are bob and sway, breeze, jitter, wiggle, turbulence. There's so many good ones. I really recommend them. Note that Adobe Express can be a little bit slower to use, but their animations are honestly superior to Canva's. But Canva's, while they're simpler, they're easier to use and a bit faster too. So like I said, pros and cons to both. For Canva, you're going to use add-on effects, and that's at the very bottom. When you go into the animations, you scroll to the very bottom. These add-on effects here are usually, they have 4: rotate, Flickr, Pulse, and Wiggle. I recommend most of them, except for Flickr, I don't use as much. And the thing is that you really need to adjust them so that they are not too crazy and hectic. Kind of like how Sydney was saying earlier about sound effects shouldn't lead the story. You really don't want these animations to overwhelm your entire screen. So basically, you're going to adjust any animation you add on to the very lowest, almost the very lowest tier. Just you'll have to watch it to see how it looks because you don't want to create chaos in your design. So other than that, you also need to make sure you're saving your designs in the correct format, and that's the MP4 file. And don't worry, Canva and Adobe Express know what they're doing. They'll immediately recommend the correct suggested format there. But please note that for Canva, you have to have the premium feature, premium subscription. Because if you don't, it will just save it as one long video. You actually have to go to your desktop and select download pages as separate files. And this is very important, and it is also a premium feature. You can't do it for free. Whereas on Adobe Express, you can either select the selected page or all pages, and it's a free feature. So I feel like that is a really key difference between them. There's just certain features that are better on both. Right. And as I mentioned before, less can be more. This, I think, is a rule of thumb for a lot of design. So while I do like to add in a lot of animations, I even have a limit. I sometimes look at it and I'm like, okay, that's too much. And I take some of the animations out. This is something you should be doing anytime you are about to post. Take a step back and look at the animation and say, am I getting distracted from the main message of the post? Do I feel like I'm not even reading the text? If so, you should really just maybe tone down some of the animations or even take some of them out entirely. Also, I recommend that if you're editing on desktop, which you will if you're doing something more complicated like this, also open up the file on your phone app. So that's when you want to open up your Adobe or Canva Express on your phone and make sure that it's in the safe zone. So when you're looking at the text, that you are not looking, you're able to read it right away because it's going to be quite small when you look on the Explore page, and you want your page, your design to pop and be very legible. If it's too small, that won't happen. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, practice makes perfect, and it's so worth it. This is pretty much the end of this crash course, but I hope that it at least gives you a start on your carousel journey. So while Instagram is really a video app, it's always positioning itself as a video app. I believe that its humble beginnings as a photo app are still like, they're always going to be there, I believe. That's why I believe while carousels are often really underrated, there is always a place for them in your content strategy. And therefore, if you aren't posting carousels yet, please do begin. I believe a lot of creators have been sharing recently about how carousels have been outperforming their reels on a consistent basis. And that's definitely what I have been experiencing myself for the past almost 2 years now. And if you are not posting them yet, I recommend starting by just posting 1 to 2 a week. It doesn't have to be crazy, but it needs to be consistent. And it really does need to also be something that suits your audience's interests. And it can't be selfish. Like Sydney said before, it can't be selfish. It needs to be stuff that actually suits your audience's interests. And the best way to just start that is by changing your most popular reel into a carousel. And if you can, make it a signature series as well. And the more you practice, the better you get, as I mentioned before. And you will marvel at how it changes from start to finish. I really am really excited for you all to begin your own carousel journey soon. All right. Thank you all for having me. And as we mentioned before, I'll be around for more questions later. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Debbie. I will echo what you said about, everyone wants to do short form video content, and short form video content is so, so important. But I think don't underestimate the power of carousels. Planoly grew the Planoly Instagram account by over 35,000 followers and increased our engagement by over 2,000% by just switching our strategy to carousels. So if that doesn't show you the power of them, I don't know what does. And now, last but not least, I am going to pass it over to Lauren, and she's going to talk about designing cohesive grids and doing personal branding. Really quickly, I want to remind you, we will have a little bit of time for a Q&A left at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat right now. Otherwise, Lauren, I will pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am Lauren. I'm a content strategist and coach based in England. And I've been working in content marketing for the last 9-10 years, maybe. So a long, long time. And my whole thing is about pulling your personality into content. So A, you have more fun with it, you enjoy the process, you don't burn out because it's something you enjoy doing. And B, you're standing out because we are what make us unique. There are so many businesses online now and we need to stand out more. So I want to start with a really quick question. When someone lands on your Instagram profile for the first time, what do they feel? Not what do they read or see or think, what do they feel? What feeling does your content give them when they look at it for the first time at quick glance? Now, I'm pretty sure Sydney and Debbie mentioned this, but attention is quick. It takes probably, if someone new lands on your profile, it probably takes about 5 seconds for them to decide whether they like the feeling, the vibe, the look and feel that you're putting out there, and whether they're either going to follow, investigate more, or go back to their feed and carry on scrolling. And that's not enough time to read a caption or watch a reel or scroll through one of your lovely carousels. It is just literally a vibe check. Do they like what you're putting out there? Does it, capture their attention? Are they excited to investigate and see more about what you do? It is just the overall look and feel. And for anyone who runs a business, like I'm sure many of us here do, or you're building a brand, your Instagram grid is pretty much free advertising. I mean, it's not really, is it? Because we've put a lot of work into it, but in the essence here, it is pretty much free advertising, and it is your shop window. It is the first thing that people see when they land on your profile. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about how to make your Instagram grid actually feel like you and bring your personality into it, and not just look cool, like, the look and feel of it, but actually feel like you as a person or as a business. So here's what I see a lot when I speak to clients or do little audits of their Instagram pages before we jump into together. I see this a lot, and to be honest, I have been a little bit guilty of it myself as well in the past. You spend so much time on making your posts look gorgeous. They're beautiful, they're polished, they're ready to go out there. The fonts are lovely, you're using lovely brand colors and everything looks very professional. But then you step back and look at your grid and it just kind of feels a little bit generic, like anyone could have made it, anyone could have created that post. It doesn't feel like you. There's no personality in there. Your branding, yes, it is your color palette, and yes, it is your fonts and the photos you use and your logo, but real brand consistency and bringing that personality into your grid is about how you're seeing your content from a real person, from a real point of view, a real person, a real brand with real feelings and real personality and emotion put into it. And yes, your personality shows up in, the words you choose, the layouts you lean towards in your carousels or your reels editing, and the little details that pop up. But when those things align, something really amazing happens, and it creates that feeling that people start to recognize your content before they've even seen your ad. Like, I know now, after listening to Debbie and Sydney, if one of their reels or carousels popped up, I would know exactly who that was straight away without even seeing their ad. With, Sydney's yellow text and the animated features on Debbie's carousels, I would know that that's them. And the same with my content. People know that I use my little icons and I wear pink all the time and the burgundy pops there, they know that that's me before they see the ad. And if my content didn't have any details or design elements, it would be brand colors, a bit like this one on the right here. It would just be brand colors with titles. There would be no sort of personality or depth to it. And the good news is you don't need a huge design toolkit. You don't need to be a graphic designer to pull off a really personality-packed grid. You just need a few intentional choices when you're designing your carousels or editing your reels to bring it all together. And yes, like we've already said, it is about those colors and the fonts and keeping the consistency there, but it's also about little ways you can bring your personality into content. I'm almost certain that if I gave my branding to any of you here, Debbie, Sydney, anyone, you would create something totally different to what I create, because we all have different ways of bringing content together. And, you know, I don't really use animated features and I don't really do reels. So I know that if I gave my branding to either of these lovely ladies, they would create something so different to what I create. And that's because we all, you know, have different ways of doing things. And my Instagram style is, you know, if you've seen my grid, it's a little bit messy, it's a bit chaotic, and that's what works for me. And your signature style needs to work for you and the way, you know, you want content to come across to your audience. And this is as deciding if your corners will be rounded. Like on this, like the since last summer pill there, I always round my corners. Some people will have cornered edges, you know. It's as simple as having your fonts, using little stickers, branded icons, the background you use. It is as simple as just the little things. It's not always the big brand choices that build your signature style. I use quite a lot of little icons in my content, quite often have a little handwriting font like this running through my content. There's all these little things that are consistent across every single carousel I post that builds that signature style that I have worked so hard on. And I want you to open up your Instagram and just have a look at your grid as if you are seeing it for the first time. You're a newbie on your Instagram, you've just found your page. And I want you to find two things for me. I want you to find something that feels a little bit off-brand. Maybe once you've rounded the corners on a photo, and on this one you've kept the corners square, or maybe you've tried a new color that isn't in your brand palette and it, you know, it's standing out because it's off-brand. And I want you to find somewhere where your personality could show up more. Are you showing your face? Are you using, you know, language that you would use every day? Little things where your personality could show up more. And either like jot them down so you've got them for future reference, or pop them in the chat and see if anyone else is resonating with the same sorts of things. And to bring it all together, there are 4 things that you need to think about when you're building that really intentional, personality packed Instagram grid that reflects you, your business, your personal brand, all of those lovely things. And I think the most important one, and any graphic designer or brand designer would give me a round of applause for this one, but everything needs to be on brand. Everything needs to be really strategically on brand. Your colors, your fonts, using, you know, your brand mark logo as a sticker, or, you know, your logo as like a little title tag. Your branding needs to be consistent, because that is the one thing that is going to help people recognize you in the feed as your brand or your business or your personal brand. So keep it on brand, please. Second is the feeling it creates. My whole thing with content is that it should feel like a party. So my style of chaotic, messy Instagram carousels really lends itself to that feeling. But if you are a wellness practitioner, for example, that wants to put your clients at ease, that messy, chaotic feeling probably isn't the vibe you want to go for. You want to go for something more calming and reassuring and refreshing. So you want to think about the feeling you want your audience to get from your content, and make sure that bleeds into the carousels or the reels you're creating. Next is your signature elements. We have spoken about this, but I want you to think about these things when you're designing your next carousel. And if you're going to round the corners, do it every time. If you're going to use a little underline or italic a word to make it stand out, do it every single time. Find those little details that make your content yours and make it stand out against that next person that they're going to see in the feed. And last but not least, consistency. It's a buzzword, yes, but it is a really important buzzword. It's so important. Your brand consistency, your tone of voice consistency, your like posting consistently, showing up consistently, the way your feed looks. I went through a phase a couple of years ago where I was changing the colors in my feed every couple of months, and my feed was an absolute mess. There was greens, there was pinks, there was all sorts of colors going on. And if someone landed on that page looking for someone to help them with content, I know that they wouldn't choose me because I'm not showing them that I can do a good job because I was all over the place. Happy to say that has changed and my feed is deliciously consistent now, but we've all been there, you know, even the content coaches and strategists amongst us have all been through those little phases where we can't quite figure out what we want to do. And this consistency and cohesion over time is what turns a nice looking post, a lovely looking post, into a recognizable brand. And I think it was Debbie earlier who said, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, like, just post it. Like, that is so, so true. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100% polished. It just needs to feel like you and be out there on the grid. Now, I want to leave you with one thing before I go and we go to questions. The next 3 posts you've got planned in your content planner, in Planoly, in Notion, wherever you plan your content, I want you to experiment with your signature elements. This is the most fun part of, you know, creating content, that you do get to experiment with things to find your thing and find what suits your content. Now, this is not me giving you permission to change your color palette in every post, but I do want you to play around with little elements, little icons, little animations, little ways of editing things, or styling your text, or styling your slides. I want you to experiment with things in your next 3 posts and figure out what really fits with you and what feels right. And when you do land on that signature style, your grid is going to look better and better with every post. And I do love to use Planoly's grid planner to see all of this come to life before I even get the posts out there and like moving them around and seeing what works in the best way. But yeah, I want you to have fun with your signature style and finding that grid look and feel that really suits who you are and what your business is all about. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you to all of you. We have about 10 minutes left, so we are going to get into the Q&A portion. We're going to get to as many of these as we can. We got a lot of great questions. Sydney, I'm going to start with you. Number one, I would actually just love to know, what is your preferred editing app of choice? Are you using CapCuts? Are you using Edits? Are you using Canva? Something else totally, entirely? What's your favorite app to use?
You know, I actually have started to use a mix of a lot of them, right? I typically go to Adobe Premiere, I start there. I do use a bit of Canva video editor as well because it's just easy. All my elements and brand colors are in there. And sometimes CapCut as well, but I try to mix it up because I think it really helps me to like have a unique style. And there are some apps that have better features than other ones. So
Yeah. Do you run, I've seen this a lot, do you run your videos, if you're going to post it as a reel, do you run that through edits, and do you think there's a benefit to doing that?
So I actually had a conversation with the strategist at Meta about this, and I don't run my content through edits, but I do think it's helpful to just like use the platform features that are native to the platforms that you're showing up on, right? So
Mhm.
I am primarily an Instagram content creator, but I'm also a creator that shows up across multiple platforms on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on TikTok. So I think for me, I more so just try to use different apps, and then whatever is like my main like platform of choice, I'll try to use more elements and features of that platform. So short
Makes
answer, no, but you can.
No, that makes sense. And then one more for you. What do you think is the biggest mistake that you see a lot of, especially like beginner editors, make when they're doing video editing?
Mm. I think trying to copy every single trend that they see. I think
Mm,
that's definitely a big one because you lose your originality. I think
mhm.
now we're in a space where there's a ton of content to take in and attention is currency. So if you can really tap into your own signature style, that's how you stand out. Like your own
Yeah,
personal style and the story that you're telling, that's how you make a difference. Yeah.
yeah, totally. Could not agree more. Debbie, I'm gonna toss this one over to you. How do you differentiate between what should be a carousel and what should be a reel? And is it too much to post the same content in both formats?
Oh, that's a great question. So I believe that content can typically be done in both formats, but I find that if you're doing a long form, like a longer, more detailed topic, I prefer carousels myself just because people tend to have more patience when they're scrolling through a carousel versus watching a long reel. Obviously, there are some creators who are really great at this. Probably Sydney is one of them, where she can really capture your attention within those precious first 3 seconds. But I find that even for a carousel, I struggle with that myself. So that's something I'm still working on. But for a carousel, as long as I have a very juicy first and second page, I find that I can go on for even 15 to even up to 20 slides, and people are still engaging with it and sharing it and getting follows. So I feel like you can do both, but you have to be very careful with how you package each one. But obviously, some topics lend to carousels a little bit better. But reels tend to be something you can do in a short form way that can be, but yeah, both have their pros and cons, but I feel like topics can be done both. I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the second slide thing too, because I think so many people don't realize that you do get those two chances for your carousel to show up in your followers' feeds. And so it's just as important to optimize that second slide as it is the first slide. So I'm really, really glad you talked about that. We also had someone kind of bring up a follow-up similar question of when you're picking a topic for a carousel, how do you know if that topic is good enough to keep the viewer's attention? And how do you maybe strengthen that if you don't think it's good enough?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like in general, if you're just starting out, you should just be experimenting and trying whatever you think might work, as long as your audience tends to actually enjoy that. In general, my best topics have come from comments or DMs when people ask me, "Oh, hey, how do you do this?" And then I'll definitely save that as a future reference for what to make next, and I'll write it up in like upcoming carousels. I need to create something in this format. Um, or if you're scrolling through your explore page and you see something that really got your attention right away and you want to do your own take on it, that's when I feel like that's a topic that will do well because it's kind of trending, but you also want to make sure you're doing your own adaptation on it. So in general, topics, that's how I find my topics. Either asking my own community or finding what works with my community via explore page.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think the commonly asked questions is such a good tip because if someone is people, your audience is asking the same questions over and over again, it's probably worth doing a whole dedicated post to that.
Exactly.
Lauren, I am going to come back to you. When using fonts in reels or carousels or just any of your graphics, are you better off going with trending fonts or should you stick to fonts that are relevant to the client or the business that you're working with?
Always your branded fonts. I think in real, well, for carousels anyway, for any sort of static content, I think with reels it's a little different. Like Sydney said, you kind of want to lean towards some of the like native fonts for that platform. But I would say in any sort of, any carousel static content, even like reel covers, I would always go for branded fonts that are your, in your brand kit.
Yeah, totally agree. And do you think, I know you talked about this kind of in the same vein, consistency with brand colors, using brand colors, right? But somebody was curious, do you think you can still have a polished brand color scheme while adding little pops of maybe an accent color in specific seasons? So maybe you're going into the winter and you want to add like a winter accent color. Do you think that there's still a way to do that? Or would you just advise like just stick to the brand colors?
I think 90% stick to your brand colors, but like if you want to use a photo of yourself and you're wearing a blue jumper but blue is not in your brand colors, then I don't think that's a problem. Like
Yeah.
pulling it in, like you say, seasonally, or if you're doing like a Christmas post and you want to bring in a bit of green or red, then I don't think that's a big issue. But I think try and keep like 90% of your grid like 100% on brand. And even if you're just like using slightly different shades of a color to like have a little bit of differentiation, I think a graphic designer would probably tell me off for saying that, but I think, yeah, I don't think it's a huge problem, but I would try to keep it majority on brand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just an example, at Planoly, we have 4 main brand colors. So there's a cornflower blue, there's a chartreuse green. Our creative director is like listening to me say this and like probably panicking that I'm going to say something wrong, but hopefully I do her justice. But there's a cornflower blue, there's a chartreuse green, there is a tomato red, and then there is a berry color. And so the tomato and the berry is the one we kind of play with a little bit. We're more in the spring and summer, you'll see us using the tomato. And then when we go into fall and winter, we'll use the berry colors. It feels more seasonally appropriate. But also for business school, you'll notice that like the main accent color we used was the berry color. So that's kind of a way you can do it too, is like to choose a specific one of your brand colors to be like one of your themes for a campaign that you're doing or something like that. So Claire, I hope I did you justice on that one. And then lastly, one question I want to ask all of you, because I would be curious all of your takes on this. And I think that there's so much opposing advice to this out there, and this is more general, not necessarily to design, but curious your thoughts about niching. I think there's so much just, information out there. Some people love niches. Some people are like, post whatever, you are the niche. So I'll start with you, Sydney, but I'd love to go around and talk to all of you about your journey with niching and like, did you niche down? Did you get away from niche? Did you change your niche? Do you believe in niching? Like, just talk to me about that, Sydney.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think instead of a niche, I don't call it a niche anymore. I more so just say that I have a through line, right? So I can talk about whatever. I can talk about makeup, I can talk about hair, I can talk about how to edit really well or how to build your career, but my through line is creativity. So every single post that you see from me, it's going to be something about creativity and designing a life that feels more creative. And I think that has really, really helped me to grow my audience. I've been creating online for like 8+ years, and I was around when it wasn't cool to be an influencer. So I think now when I'm building community, I think a lot about like, how can I show up in a consistent way that's not always how I'm posting, but more so what I'm saying. And every single post for me, I tell my creators, or I tell my creative friends, as I call them, like, I can't wait to see what you create, whether it is a post or it is like how you're building your life. So I would more so say a through line is important rather than having like a niche per se.
Oh, I love that so much. Debbie, I'll go to you next.
Right. Yeah, I really love what Sydney said there about having a through line. That's a great way to put it. I kind of have something similar where I would say your brand persona, your identity is the most important thing, where every time someone sees you show up, regardless of what topic it is, they'll know it's you. I always tell my clients that I don't think you should just have one niche or one topic that you post on all the time. I prefer having a more well-rounded approach to it. So in general, I just, as a rule of thumb, I'll say like 3 to 5 content pillars. So that could be lifestyle, that could be creator tips in my case, or even bookish content if that's something I love. And don't try to restrict yourself to just like, I only post makeup posts, unless that's really what you want to do. So I generally find that you shouldn't have to restrict yourself. It should be more about the overall, that vibe check that Lauren was talking about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And Lauren, we'll wrap it up with you.
Yeah, to echo what both Debbie and Sydney said, really, I think I started out as like a generalist marketer. So I used to speak about all sorts of stuff. But now my through line, I guess, is content strategy, content design, creating content you love. Like, that is what I talk about. So there's a lot of topics within that. But yeah, I guess my niche, my zone is content as a whole.
Yeah, and I think, to tie it all up with one big, beautiful bow, it really does come back to if you have a strong enough visual identity, I think you can kind of branch out and talk about whatever you want to talk about, because I think Lauren said this earlier, but for all 3 of you, if I were to see any one of your posts in my feed, I would immediately be able to clock, oh, this is Sydney, this is Debbie, this is Lauren. Like, you guys have such strong visual identities that I think that gives you kind of that through line in and of itself. So thank you guys so much. I know I learned so much today. I know everyone else on here learned so much today. We still have so many questions, so we will answer those on the Planoly Instagram. So head over there if you have, and you can submit more questions if you have more. continue answering those throughout the day, but cannot thank our incredible speakers enough. You guys were just so, so amazing. Thank you for your presentations. There is one session left in Planoly Business School. It is LinkedIn 601, our LinkedIn Growth Lab. We have some incredible marketers that I'm so excited to talk to next week. So it is not too late to sign up for that if you haven't already. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Thank you again to our incredible speakers. Please go give them a follow, show them some love on Instagram. And otherwise, we will see you in class next week.